I grew up in a small 2 square mile city right outside of Detroit, where there were a lot of tiny houses packed right next to each other, and everyone's family, including mine, relied heavily on the auto industry. And the high school I went to was known as Heroin High. When I was 18, I moved to downtown Detroit for college, where I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I was an after-school teacher at a foster and adoption agency, an assistant teacher at an alternative high school for pregnant and mothering teens, and I was also living in Detroit post-recession, pre-bankruptcy, right before the nation regarded the city as making this really cool comeback, and right before my rent doubled in 1 year. So I was seeing a lot of what I believe to be social injustices. I was seeing that people were living on the sidewalks and dying during the really cold winters. I saw that the city wasn't paying for the streetlights to be on in all the neighborhoods, and that was increasing crime. I saw that they no longer paid to maintain city parks, so they were no longer safe for children to play in. People's homes were being foreclosed on by the hundreds, and the city was doing mass sweeps of water shutoffs, even though residents paid their water bill because there was so much confusion in the local government. So I thought, why be a teacher? Like, what good will that do? I should be a journalist, because that will make a huge impact in the world. So I graduated college with no journalism experience and somehow convinced an editor at a very tiny paper in Michigan to hire me. It was just an hour outside the city with 3 reporters, and what I found is that the cities outside of the central metropolis made an even slower comeback from the recession than the city did. So I was reporting in a city that was struggling under pension debt, that did have emergency funds for seniors who couldn't afford to pay their utility bills in the winter when it got really cold, but the waiting list was 3 years because there wasn't enough money in the funds. And while I was at the paper for 4 years, I wrote mostly about poverty, homelessness, and opioids. So I continually saw, through my reporting, through living in Detroit, and from where I grew up, that help wasn't given because there was nothing left to give. Then a year and a half ago, I was given the opportunity to transfer within our company and ended up at this place called the Desert Sun. I was really excited, and I jumped at the chance to live someplace where there were no seasons and no snow. The day I left Michigan, it snowed, rained, and hailed before I made it past the state line. So I was so pumped to move here. And when I arrived, I just couldn't believe the wealth that I saw. I had never been any place like this before. The first night, my dad and I went to a restaurant that was known for their pizza, but it was so fancy that there were not even pepperonis on the premises. Just couldn't comprehend that. But what I was most shocked about is the public money that I saw everywhere. There were no potholes in the streets. In Michigan, people started planting flowers in the potholes because they thought it was funny. And not only did we have city parks here, but they sparkled and shined and were continually updated. When the neighbors just couldn't play pickleball next to the tennis players, there was enough money to separate them. And there was public art everywhere, so with this idea that I just couldn't believe how much wealth there was compared to where I came from, I was assigned to cover the local government in the Mid-Valley. Some of my cities had comfortable rainy day funds, and one even paid off their pension debt a few years ago, which just completely blew my mind because the city I was covering was facing emergency manager takeover because they couldn't handle their pension debt. And so when I looked into the social service structure, I was expecting to see radical differences. I was expecting to see more funding for social services, but what I found was still a great need. And I found that there was hundreds and hundreds of people experiencing homelessness, and that was increasing every year. I also saw that we were living in a very philanthropic valley, which I'm very proud of, but I saw that there was a lot of money going to things like a really fabulous film festival and fashion shows, but maybe not that same level of money was going to the nonprofits that were working so hard to serve those experiencing homelessness. And it's not in the newspaper's agenda to tell people what next steps are, but I can tell you what I've seen along with my partner, Jay, as we've reported on homelessness for the past year. We saw a man be dropped from the housing list because he missed a phone call because his cell phone wasn't charged. He was living behind a junkyard and with no utilities, no way to charge his phone. But if we're being honest, even though he had a voucher, we don't have enough affordable housing to quickly get people in those units anyways. And we also don't have enough money to fund the kind of caseworker it would have taken to get him housed, which is the caseworker with a light enough load that they have time to drive out to where he's living, because he hasn't left the same 1 mile radius for the past 10 years. So it's really easy to find him even if his cell phone died. We also found that one of our sources was living in an underground tunnel, the big tunnels that wash the rain into the washes, because she felt safe there, not just from people, but from the really high summer temperatures. When I met her, the city she was living in had just put fences up around shaded areas where they knew people experiencing homelessness stayed. But I saw really great moments too. I saw the Indio police stand up for someone who was homeless when a business tried to kick them out. And I saw the magic that can happen when a caseworker calls their client every single day, shows up once a week, and is the first line of defense between a client and a landlord as everyone is trying to navigate this new experience together. And I'm so thankful that I get to see both these really hard moments and these really great moments, because at the Desert Sun, we haven't always shined such a great light on homelessness. But about a year ago, we got some grants that gave us the resources to be able to do that. So with these grants, we were trying to figure out how to tackle this topic in new ways. And the first thing we did was look at what reader interest in homelessness was. And big surprise, no one reads my stories. Everyone wants to read about the Kardashians, but my stories continually don't meet our internal readership goals. But my editors keep promising that they won't fire me because they know this topic is really important for the community. But so we've tried new things and experimented in this past year. One thing we did was put out a survey asking readers what questions they wanted answered, and did a Q&A format. And some of those questions were old news, like why did Roy's close? No matter how many times you answer that, people keep asking. I just keep sending them links to our old stories. And there were new questions too. But we wanted to make sure we answered every single question because we wanted readers to take this journey with us. And that format created a lot of new engagement with readers. And I've had really great ongoing conversations with people I've never talked to before, and I appreciate that. We also saw that a lot of decisions were being made by committees and boards without public comment from those the decision would impact. And that makes sense, because if you are homeless and just trying to figure out where you're gonna sleep that night, taking 2 or 3 buses to a meeting isn't your top priority or even attainable. So we decided to go out and interview 200 people experiencing homelessness and say, tell us what your needs are, we'll put it in the paper, maybe the right person will read it. The last thing we did was change how we analyze the impact of our stories. We knew we couldn't just look at the number of people clicking on the story. We needed to analyze it differently. So we started keeping track of all the emails I received from readers. A year ago, when I wrote the first story about homelessness, I got a very long handwritten letter by a man who suggested that the solution to the problem was to sterilize everyone who is homeless, because obviously that's how homelessness happens. So that was really disheartening and very frustrating to receive. But now a year later, I get such different emails and letters. Now people are asking what they can do to help, how they can make an impact and make a change, and I appreciate that. And so it's too soon to tell if any of our reporting will make policy changes, but it has created empathy in the community, and that's a win we'll take. Thank you.